Inside the Magic, show number 321 for May 29th, 2011. It is Sunday, May 29th, 2011, and this is show 321 of Inside the Magic. As always, I'm your host, Ricky Briganti, and we do have another great show packed with Disney and theme park news and a whole lot of fun. And before we get started, I do invite you, as always, to visit InsideTheMagic.net. There you'll find all of our podcasts, videos, photos, news, articles, and so much more. And if you ever have any news, tips, or questions, you can contact me by writing to Ricky at InsideTheMagic.net or call and leave a message at 407-494-4ITM. That's 4486. And now, let's get on with the show. This week's episode of Inside the Magic is brought to you by Magical Travel. Beat the heat this summer. Book a 5-night package with park tickets for July travel dates, and everyone in your party will receive a free 1-day water park ticket to Typhoon Lagoon or Blizzard Beach. Restrictions do apply, but summer is fast approaching, so plan your summer vacation today. Call Magical Travel at 866-207-8387 or visit them online at magicaltravel.com to receive a free price quote, and be sure to mention Inside the Magic to receive your free Disney gift card for qualifying bookings when you book your Disney vacation with Magical Travel. And by listeners like you, thanks very much to Dale Ankrum and all of our monthly recurring donation subscribers. If you want to support Inside the Magic, simply head on over to InsideTheMagic.net, look for the PayPal donation links, or click through any of our affiliate links. It all supports us, and I thank you very much for that. And now, we'll start off the show with our trip around the world. So we are back once again live on YouTube. Different, changes every time we do this. No set schedule or anything, but anybody who is listening out there, just listening to the audio version, you might want to head on over to InsideTheMagic.net or to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/InsideTheMagic, and check out what the video version of this show now looks like. It's kind of an enhanced podcast, and, you'll see graphics as I talk about the news and all the various other segments, and you'll see me talking as well. It's a whole lot of fun. Of course, there's a live chat room as well, and it's great fun to interact with everybody and be able to do this online. So a new fun feature of Inside the Magic that I'll be trying to do as often as possible. In addition, last week when I was talking about the same subject, I mentioned the subject of video podcast and whether or not we'd be continuing to release video podcasts that is not the video version of this audio podcast, but rather separate video files on iTunes and that are downloadable through the regular feeds. And I received quite a few emails saying that you miss the video podcast and you do want them to return, that you don't necessarily always want to watch videos on YouTube or on the website. You want to have them to download and keep. So I definitely hear you, and I will resume making downloadable videos sometime in the near future. Don't have one for you this week. I didn't have time to prepare one, but maybe I'll go back and release some of the back videos over the last few weeks since the last time that I did have a video podcast out there. So now, with all of that out of the way, how about we get to this week's news? And boy, is there quite a lot of it. In fact, it's been, we're actually going to start out in California. It's been quite a busy week in the world of Disney, starting in California with Mickey's Soundsational Parade. That's at Disneyland Park, and it made its official debut just a couple of days ago on Friday. It goes up and down Main Street and through the park. It is an all-new parade featuring Disney characters, Aladdin, Ariel, Cinderella, Peter Pan, Mickey Mouse. It's a journey of sound and story, as Disney calls it. There are new parade floats that are inspired by children's pop-up books. There's live drum lines providing plenty of rhythm and percussion and jazz horns and lots of musical instruments and oversized drums. And it's just a high-energy show that everybody seems to be enjoying so far. Of course, there are videos that you can find online of it. I'm not going to share any audio or video with you this week because I haven't seen it myself yet. I'm going to be heading out to California in just a few days to check it out in person, and at that point I will come back with my own video and audio to share. But if you're eager and you don't want to wait for my version, I'm sure you can find it out there somewhere online. In addition, this week to Mickey's Soundsational Parade, which has been getting plenty of high praise, The Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea adventure over at Disney California Adventure, has been in soft opening. First it did some cast member previews, and then it has soft opened here and there for just any old guests that have shown up. to see it. And reviews have been mixed as far as the Little Mermaid ride. A lot of people have said it's really amazing, really wonderful. They really enjoyed it. Some fans were hoping for more, but it could be that they were expecting an e-ticket attraction, and of course it is not. It is a dark ride, very much in the style of traditional Disney dark rides, but with new audio animatronics. Again, I have not seen it yet in person. It opens officially just a few days from now at the end of this week, and I'll be there for the grand opening. Certainly we'll come back with a full report on that. In addition, out at the Disneyland Resort, also just opened at the Disneyland Hotel, are Trader Sam's, Tangaroa Terrace. At Trader Sam's is the Tiki Bar, Tangaroa Terrace food, Disneyland pool area with monorail slides. A lot of great reviews coming in for all of that as well, but once again, I haven't been there to see it myself yet, so I promise I will talk about all of that much, much more on next week's show, and then probably the week after as well. Next week, due to my travel plans, I'm not exactly sure when the podcast will go up. I'll try to still get it up on Sunday, but it may have to wait till Monday, so just keep that in mind as we move forward here. Now, of course, the other attraction that's opening up out at Disneyland that's already open out here in Florida is Star Tours. The adventures continue. It had its grand opening. We talked all about that in the last couple of weeks. Well, it's going to be grand opening on June 3rd out in California. But in addition to all of these grand openings, Disney has been holding some really exciting meetups for fans out here. I talked last week about the Midnight Meetup and shared the Imagineer question and answer session from that Midnight Meetup. And out in California, there have been some fan events as well, where they invited people to come out and check out Star Tours out there. And I actually posted this week on InsideTheMagic.net a recap from both coasts out here in Florida as well as in California of both fan meetups, guest meetups, in order to preview Star Tours for everybody. You'll see video from both of the meetups. You'll see Disneyland's first public ride, lots of cheering going on and all of that. So head on over to InsideTheMagic.net to check all of that out. And if you were at one of the meetups, you may just see yourself in the video or in photos. Now let's jump back out here to Orlando. We're coming up this Monday over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Disney's going to be continuing a tradition for the last couple of years by inviting the new American Idol winner to show up at the park. The winner, I hope this isn't spoiling it for anyone. It's been a couple of days, a few days since they announced the winner. Scotty McCreery is the most recent winner of American Idol, and he'll be at Hollywood Studios Monday morning, May 30th at 10 a.m. in a motorcade, just like Chris Allen and Lee DeWise did in the last couple of years. And then he's going to be answering questions on a stage just outside the American Idol Experience attraction. It doesn't seem like he's going to sing. Lee DeWise did not sing last year, and it seems like Scotty McCreery will not be singing either, but he will be there, so if anyone is a fan, you can see him in person. Now, there have been some talk that the top 5 would actually be showing up to Hollywood Studios. It's likely that the top 5 are going to be there on Sunday. However, it is not a scheduled public appearance. So don't go to Hollywood Studios on Sunday expecting to see the top 5 or even Scotty McCreery. It's not an announced thing. It's something that sort of just got out there, and Disney may be shooting a little bit with the top 5, but again, it's not for the public to really go to see. Really, Scotty McCreery on Monday morning is what you want to see if you're a fan of American Idol. Staying out here in Florida, moving on over to Epcot now, where this week Disney announced the 2011, this year's lineup for the Eat to the Beat concert series over at Epcot for the International Food and Wine Festival. I'm going to run through the acts real quick. It all starts on September 30th with Taylor Dayne, and there's going to be different acts every couple of days, and there's nightly concerts throughout the duration of the Food and Wine Festival. So following Taylor Dayne are 38 Special, John Cicada, Roger Hodgson, formerly of Supertramp, Billy Ocean, Starship starring Mickey Thomas, Sugar Ray, The Orchestra starring former members of ELO, Howard Jones, Boyz II Men, Gin Blossom's sister Hazel Hansen, the Pointer Sisters, Night Ranger, Air Supply, Richard Marx, and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy will be rounding out the bunch beginning on November 11th and finishing on the 13th of November, and that's when the whole thing is going to be wrapping up this year. So if you're a fan of any of those bands, Epcot is going to be the place to go and check them out. And actually, let's jump back to Star Wars related topic here for just a moment, where this week, I think it may have even been after I had recorded last week's show, so I'm not sure if I mentioned it last week or not. Last Saturday, I went back to Star Wars Weekends and went to the Hyperspace Hoopla at the end of the day. I didn't have a chance to catch that on opening day. I saw the dance-off with the Star Wars stars that is always extremely popular every year. Of course, I recorded it, posted a video online, and then the video just went viral. It was played on the television network G4 as the #1 video for the day on the Attack of the Show on G4. It was all over the internet as well. Last I checked, it was a bit over 200,000 views on YouTube. So if you haven't seen this year's Dance-Off with the Star Wars Stars, definitely head on over to InsideTheMagic.net. Check it out because it's a particularly funny edition that everybody seems to be enjoying very much. Here's some random news from Walt Disney World. A new produce partnership is now in effect for Walt Disney World, the resorts, and the cruise lines out here. It's with Chiquita brands, and there will now be Chiquita brand products positioned next to candy bars and snacks throughout the resort. Moving on now to some D23 Expo news, where a couple of things were announced this week. Of course, the D23 Expo is put on by the D23 Disney Fan Club, and it will happen August 19th through 21st out in Anaheim at the Anaheim Convention Center right near Disneyland. And once again, returning this year, it was just announced this week, will be the Walt Disney Archives exhibit. It's the Treasures of the Walt Disney Archives. It's going to be a 12,000 square foot exhibit this time around, featuring items from the Pirates of the Caribbean films, Alice in Wonderland, National Treasure, the original Tron, The Rocketeer, Pinocchio, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and many, many more. They're going to have a 23-foot model of the Black Pearl, which definitely is something I want to see. That should be very, very impressive. There will be the Dharma Initiative Volkswagen van from the ABC series Lost. Walt Disney's limousine will be there, and many, many other items from the archives. Should be really exciting to see all of that in person. In addition to all of that, once again at the D23 Expo, the Disney Legends Awards will be held, just like it was a couple of years ago, so that should be exciting. It hasn't been announced yet who the legends that will be added to the growing list that will be this time around, but that will be announced once again at the Expo. And then, in addition, D23 will be holding the Ultimate Disney Trivia Tournament presented by Hasbro, Trivial Pursuit Disney for All Edition. It's a very long name now because of the sponsorship, but some more details about this Ultimate Trivia Tournament have come out. It's actually going to begin the day before the D23 Expo on August 18th. They're going to have a full day of kind of a qualifying round after qualifying round where they're going to whittle down the group into the best of the best. You're going to answer some questions and answer some more questions and more questions, and then finally, those who make it through that whole first day will be able to come back on Friday, August 19th, the first day of the D23 Expo, and that's when there will be the semifinal and the final rounds for ultimately competing for the grand prize in this trivia tournament of a cruise vacation on the Disney Fantasy ship when it launches next year in 2012. The questions in this Disney Trivia Tournament are actually going to be pulled directly from the new Hasbro Trivial Pursuit Disney for All edition, and that will be released this fall, presumably after the D23 Expo. Otherwise, you would just be able to memorize all the answers, and that wouldn't be very fair. But then again, I guess if you memorize all the answers, that means you're doing a good job with Disney trivia. Regardless, I'm not sure if I'm going to participate this time around. I do know a lot of Disney trivia, but in looking through some of the sample questions over on the D23 website, I don't know if I have the necessary Disney knowledge to make it far in this tournament. Plus, I'm not sure I want to spend an entire day on the August 18th doing nothing but answering questions with the hopes of making it into the final round. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see for that. But certainly good luck to anybody who jumps in there and tries in the Ultimate Disney Trivia Tournament. So now let's actually turn away from Disney here for just a few moments as we talk about a couple of other interesting topics that came up this week. There was something called Powwow each year, which is kind of a travel convention of sorts, very informational. It was here in Orlando a couple of years ago. This year it was somewhere else. It's coming back to Orlando very soon. And at the Powwow this year, Universal Studios in California had some additional details to share about the upcoming Transformers ride that they are working on building out there right now. Transformers The Ride 3D will be launching at Universal Studios Hollywood, not Florida, but in California, in spring 2012. It's going to feature original photorealistic 3D HD media with special effects, and they're calling it a roaming flight simulator ride system, so it sounds like it's going to be a bit different than Spider-Man. Everybody thought it was going to be a Spider-Man clone, like out here in Islands of Adventure, but this is actually going to be a bit different. They're having what they're calling a media silo, a really tall 60-foot tall building in which you'll be going around and battling Megatron and helping out Optimus Prime, on all of that. They have said that the original voice actors will certainly be back, which is important. I certainly want to hear Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime, etc. And the new story for the ride is going to be written by Michael Bay, and think what you will about that. So there it is. That's Transformers details for now. I'm sure more will come about for that in the near future. Back out here to Orlando for a couple more stories here. Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, in conjunction with Visit Orlando, announced this week that Orlando in 2010 drew a record-breaking 51.455 million visitors. That is up 10.5% from 46.6 million in 2009, and that also marks Orlando as the very first destination in history of this country to have more than 50 million visitors in a year. A great honor. Orlando is still the most visited destination in the United States. We're certainly very happy to welcome all of the tourists here to Orlando, and it just keeps on growing. A 10.5% increase from the prior year, 2009, is just crazy. It's great to see that people are once again enjoying everything about Orlando, and I imagine it's going to keep on growing even further. The one footnote to that they would not comment on, although everybody is probably thinking this likely is the case. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter, of course, opened last year, and you have to imagine that drew a very large crowd. I know Universal said that something, I can't remember the exact numbers, it was millions of people have ridden Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey over the last year since it's been open. It hasn't even been open a year yet, and that certainly has helped to put Orlando over that 50 million visitor mark. Also out here in the Central Florida area, but not Orlando, over in Tampa, just a couple of days ago at Busch Gardens, the new Cheetah Hunt roller coaster opened, and I am actually going to be talking about that just a little bit more later in this week's show. I know last week on the show I said I probably wasn't going to talk about Cheetah Hunt, but it ended up being such a great ride that I just can't resist, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So stay tuned for a little more about that. Also here in the Orlando area, Legoland, Florida, this week announced their opening date. It will be October 15th of this year. So if you're looking forward to visiting Legoland, October 15th is the day you want to be there. Well, it's going to be crowded, I'm sure, but if you want to be there on opening day, that's when you want to be there. And over on International Drive, work in progress is Dave & Buster's, a restaurant and arcade chain. It's opening its Orlando location on July 18th. However, there's going to be a grand pre-opening event on Saturday, July 16th from 6 to 10 p.m., and that pre-opening will benefit Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Florida. It's $25 per VIP ticket for that pre-opening event. That includes admission, free parking, 2 drink tickets, a $20 play card, a Dave & Buster's Power Card, hors d'oeuvres, and a buffet dinner. So you get a lot for that $25, and it goes to charity, and you get to see Dave & Buster's before it opens. A great deal. You do have to be 21 or older in order to go, since the drinks will be freely flowing practically throughout the night. You can actually purchase the tickets over at the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Florida website, and there it is, Dave & Buster's. I am definitely looking forward to it. So now let's turn to the world of movies, of Disney movies, of course, where a really interesting trailer showed up online this week for, it's called Green with Envy. And it's starring Jason Segel and Amy Adams and a few other familiar faces. It's kind of the story of a boy and a girl and Hollywood. And, well, you know what? You might want to just head to InsideTheMagic.net, watch the trailer, just search for Green with Envy, and there might be a bit of a surprise in there if you haven't seen it already. I don't want to ruin it for you, so check it out. You won't be sorry. And just a couple of days ago, actually a few days ago, I received a copy to review of the Disney touchstone film Romeo and Juliet, which I did not see in theaters, although it did fairly well. And so I sat down and watched Romeo and Juliet, and it was all right. I'm not going to do a full review here on the show, but if you want to know more about both the movie itself as well as the home release on Blu-ray, Blu-ray 3D, and DVD, you're going to want to go over to InsideTheMagic.net, where I did post a full review of the entire thing. Just in summary, it kind of feels like an extended music video for Elton John more than a movie. It actually wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was a halfway decent movie. And certainly, if you're an Elton John fan, you would enjoy very much Romeo and Juliet. If you're not an Elton John fan, maybe not quite as much. But anyway, you can read more of my thoughts over at the website. Continuing with movies, there's actually a bit of a 3D debate going on that's been kind of sparked by Pirates of the Caribbean 4 on Stranger Tides, which I reviewed last week on the show. Apparently, only 47% of the crowd in the opening days of the film ended up seeing the new Pirates film in 3D, despite it being the very first Pirates film that has been available in 3D. And industry experts are seeing this as kind of a wake-up call. The film has surpassed $400 million at the box office. It opened with $90.1 million opening weekend. It's done very, very well, and not necessarily attributed to 3D this time around. It could be that people are finally putting their foot down, not wanting to pay extra for it. I did see Pirates in 3D. I was at a special screening. I didn't pay for it, and I wouldn't have paid for it. It looked good in 3D, but it really didn't add anything much to the movie. There were just very minor moments that I thought, hey, that's in 3D, and the rest just kind of eh. So it definitely seems like 3D may be on its way out. Slowly. Probably not anytime soon. On that note, actually, The Lion King is being released, finally, in 3D, both to theaters and at home. It's going to have a 2-week theatrical run. September 16th is when it's going to begin. And then on October 4th, you can find The Lion King on Blu-ray 3D at home. It'll also be released in regular Blu-ray. And then a month and a half later is when you'll be able to get it on one-disc DVD edition, which you probably already own Lion King on DVD anyway. But Blu-ray is when it's coming, and then Blu-ray 3D, they're converting it, so 3D's not dead yet. Certainly not. Let's turn to some comic book news that has me excited. Kaboom is the comic creators formerly known as Boom Kids, and this week they launched their newest Disney Adventures comic, Ducktales, which one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Love the characters. Of course, Scrooge McDuck is one of my favorites. And this series is written by Epic Mickey video game creator Warren Spector. So if you haven't already, definitely head on out. Grab your copy of Ducktales #1 from Kaboom. Let's move on to video games now, where Disney Interactive Studios this week announced a new game called Disney Universe. It's a multiplayer action-adventure game going to be available for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii, as well as Windows, PC, and Mac. Disney's calling it a mix-up of worlds inspired by animated and live-action Disney films, in which you're kind of running around as these little blue characters, kind of boxes with faces almost, and you suit up, as Disney says, as Disney and Pixar characters. You can put on a suit as Alice, or Mike Wazowski from Monsters, Inc., or a Tron costume, or Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, as some examples that Disney has released so far, and you'll run around different worlds interacting with other people, and It seems to be getting a lot of comparisons to the game Little Big Planet. I haven't actually played Little Big Planet, so I can't personally say how similar or different it is. Of course, I haven't played Disney Universe since they just announced it, but it's coming out in fall of 2011, and it seems like a Disney spin on being able to just hop online, put on some costumes, and run around and have some adventurous fun. And speaking of video games, here's some news that I just picked up earlier today. There's a Disney Research in Pittsburgh is working on a system they're calling Tactile Brush, in which it's going to feature 12 vibrating motors that you would basically put behind your back, and it would sort of trick you into feeling a sense of touch or even G-forces or maybe the sensation of water running down your back. It's really kind of the next generation of force feedback when playing a video game. Of course, it is just research at the moment, but that would certainly be interesting if you had a controller in your hand that was vibrating, and then you had this thing on your back that you're leaning on, that all of a sudden you feel prickly things, kind of like being, I guess it's tough to be a bug over at Animal Kingdom. Certainly could make some fun interactive movies that way. But anyway, that is all research in progress. Just thought it would be interesting to note. Oh, here's a little more movie news that I forgot to mention just a few minutes ago. I guess I put it out of order. Anyway, the weekend of March 8th, 2013, that has been announced as the release date for the new Oz, the Great and Powerful, going to be directed by Sam Raimi, with James Franco playing Oz, Mila Kunis playing Theodora. Michelle Williams and Rachel Weisz are in talks to play a couple of roles in there, and it was announced this week as well that Zach Braff from Scrubs will be playing a role in this Oz film from Disney as well. And one more bit of news this week. I had said before, and it was widely reported, that Disney was trying to trademark SEAL Team 6 after the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound overseas. Well, this week, Disney pulled their application from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office after some pressure from the Navy. They are no longer pursuing this trademark for SEAL Team 6. And that'll do it for your news from around the world this week. This week's tip comes in from Andrea, who writes, I just got back from Disneyland, and I was there throughout the whole day. Towards the end of the day, my sister and I went to the candy shop on Main Street, which I got a small unicorn horn lollipop that I'm still eating as I type this. We walked around Main Street, USA for a bit and sat down on a bench while my sister called our parents. I was looking around for a specific building, the Disney Gallery. My sister had mentioned it earlier, and while we still had time, I wanted to see what was in it. We got up to go walk around, and I found it, and the Disney Gallery is sort of a secretive building. The sign for it isn't very big, but we found it either way, and when we went inside, we were transfixed in all the artwork and the mini replicas. We saw 2 original Disneyland posters that used to hang in the entrance area many years ago, priced at $3,900. We also saw some of Walt Disney's original sketches, or so we think. Also concept art from rides like It's a Small World, Pirates of the Caribbean. Along with that, there were pictures from places in the park where Walt stayed, like the fire station on Main Street, USA, and what they looked like at the time. Sadly, we couldn't stay long, but next time I'm at the park, I'm definitely going to spend more time in there. I think the Disney Gallery seems to be a little neglected, and thought it could use some more visitors. So I am giving you this tip as a great way to end your day at Disneyland. Well, you know what, Andrea, thanks very much for that tip. It's one of those things that I wouldn't think to normally mention because I always make it a point to visit the Disney Gallery when I'm at Disneyland. It used to be up above Pirates of the Caribbean until they installed the suite there. Now it's over kind of in the town square area, right when you enter the park. And every time I have gone in there since they reopened the new location, it has not been crowded. And it's a really wonderful place to go in and just hang out and look at all the artwork, like you said. And I do think everyone should check it out whenever you have a chance, heading on over to Disneyland. So thanks very much for that tip. Everyone else out there, email your tips to tips@insidethemagic.net. And now, before we continue on with our main features this week, I do want to put in a quick word about Lanyard Lab. If you have a business that you'd like to promote, or maybe you just need to hang some name tags or ID cards around your neck, around a school, church, or really any organization, please visit us over at lanyardlab.com. We can design and produce custom lanyards for you with any of your text or logo, your colors, whatever you want to put on there. If you head to the website, you can just fill out our online quote request form, submit that to us, and we'll email you back with a complete price quote along with a proof showing you just what your lanyards will look like. And from there, you can buy online, make any changes you want. It's all very easy. So check it out over at lanyardlab.com. That's LANYARDLAB.com. So we do have quite a bit of Disney recap fun to get to this week, but before we jump into that, I do want to add some non-Disney information and a bit of a review here because I simply could not resist. I'm talking about Cheetah Hunt over at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. It's not something I was particularly planning on talking about on this week's show because I thought, hey, it's a new roller coaster, and there's not a whole lot to say necessarily about this coaster. But after riding it, I feel obligated almost to talk about it here because it is such a fun ride. Let me take you back a little bit. It's actually two things that have opened over at Busch Gardens. It's a Cheetah Hunt roller coaster as well as the Cheetah Run animal exhibit, and it's all just so exciting to walk through this new area. Of course, it's an exciting new ride, but you also get plenty of sights and information about what is the world's fastest land animal. Now, it opened on Friday, May 27th, but I had a chance to go the day before for a preview, and during that preview, I learned a lot about what really made Cheetah Hunt come to be, and I think this is where you'll really enjoy it. Whether or not you're interested in Busch Gardens, it is fun to hear about just how a ride like this, and I'll tell you in a minute just how unique of a ride this is, especially the Orlando, Central Florida area. It's interesting to hear how it came to be and how it has a connection to a very popular franchise elsewhere. So in order to tell you that, I actually talked with Busch Gardens Vice President of Design and Engineering, Mark Rose, and I will let him speak for himself in telling you exactly how he came to create this new attraction for. Here we are, Cheetah Hunt. It is done. It is complete. Tell me a little bit about the project from when you first conceived of it now till this grand opening.
Well, my first thought, which goes back 6 years, was when I was watching the movie Star Wars, the 6th movie, when they're on the planet where the Ewoks are, and they stole the speeders, and they're speeding through the forest chasing each other. Remember that scene?
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking, could I build a roller coaster that's close to the ground, going in and out of environments, and could I do that? And to do that, I need technology that would launch you. And I could build the environments. It could be through bamboo or through a forest or through a canyon or a raging river or whatever. I could build those kinds of environments if I could get it close to the ground. So that was my first idea. As we were talking about bringing animals into our collection, cheetahs has always been something we've been trying to bring back. And when we talked about the characteristics of the cheetah being fast, agile, graceful, it's like, well, that's what kind of the roller coaster I'm thinking is about. So we kind of started marrying the two ideas. So we built both Cheetah Hunt and Cheetah Run.
So now that it's built and you've had a chance to finally ride it after all these months, how similar do you feel like riding this is to, a cheetah running through the wild?
I think it's very close. You feel that acceleration. You're close to things. You're in trenches. It's really quite an exciting trip.
And looking at it side by side with the actual cheetahs running, is it exciting to see it all put together?
It's very exciting, very fulfilling to see it all put together.
Now tell me, in the grand scope of Busch Gardens roller coasters, of course there's great coasters here. What's unique about Cheetah Hunt?
Well, I think Cheetah Hunt is unique in that it does use launch technology, so it doesn't have a large hill. It's very long, 4,429 feet. A long ride, over almost 2 minutes of ride time. And it unfolds in chapters that it's nicely paced. So you're launched, you go through an element, you're launched, you go through a tower, you're dropped. I mean, it's just a nice pace that unfolds before you.
Now, of course, coaster fans are really eager to find out all the specifics about a ride. Can you tell me more about G-forces and the launches themselves?
Well, we have 3 launches. The first one gets you to 33 miles an hour. The second one, 60. The third one, 55 miles an hour. You're pulling a little less than 4 Gs, but the lateral forces are very limited, so you're not really being tossed around. And we're allowed to let guests to 48 inches ride on this ride, so it's a smaller guest too, but it's not less. It's still got all the thrills that everybody's come to expect at Busch Gardens.
So that's good to hear. I mean, more people can then come and ride Cheetah Hunt. It's not necessarily going to be the most intense coaster, but it's still going to be a fun experience then.
Oh, it's absolutely fun.
And coming out of this project, looking forward, are you just excited to see this now? Of course, looking to the future of Busch Gardens, are there more in the works?
We're always planning 5-10 years out, so we've got more things on the horizon.
Great, we look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
So there's a little bit about Cheetah Hunt and its actually thought process of getting there from watching Star Wars, of all things. I definitely wouldn't have expected that, but I can certainly see the similarities now that I have ridden it. Now, I don't want to go on and on about a roller coaster. Of course, riding it is the only way to really experience it and really appreciate all that it is. However, I do want to say that it is a really excellent ride. It had a not so smooth opening over at Busch Gardens. Some opening day jitters, if you will, technical difficulties both on preview day and on opening day with a lot of downtime. I actually ended up waiting around the park, kind of riding other things for about 7 hours before I had a chance to go on the ride. But when I finally did, even though I was there for around 7 hours waiting for it, essentially, it was worth the wait. It was that good of a ride. I really, really enjoyed just kind of the unique, smooth, graceful, entertaining nature of this attraction. It's a great mixture of thrill and fun. And if you want to see exactly what I mean, you can go over to InsideTheMagic.net, watch a couple of point-of-view videos that I shot while I was there in the front row and in the back row of the ride and really see what it's all about. Of course, you won't get the same feeling as if you were there in person, but you can at least see what it's like. It really combines kind of thrilling elements with a gentleness and almost a serenity. The movements of the ride are really they're inspired by and based on those of a cheetah as it kind of stalks and hunts its prey. And you hear that and you think, really, can a roller coaster really be simulating the way a wild animal moves? And surprisingly, yes, it does a very good job at that. It's very unpredictable as far as where it moves. It has 3 launches throughout its more than 4,000 feet of track. Each launch is accompanied by a cheetah roar, which is a whole lot of fun. But other than that noise, it's almost a dead silent coaster, which is very strange. It's never obvious which direction that it's going to be headed next, so it's almost like a silent predator moving its way through through Busch Gardens. And whether it's rounding corners or speeding up or slowing down or going way high in the air with some great views, running over a riverbed through some canyons and channels and left and right, and it very much resembles the way a cheetah would be, kind of holding back and waiting and then pouncing and chasing and swerving and jumping. And it is absolutely my favorite ride at Busch Gardens now. Definitely a great coaster. There is the other half of it, which is Cheetah Run. That is where you get to see cheetahs up close and supposed to see them kind of run along at full speed, which is 60 to 70 miles an hour. Unfortunately, I did not see the cheetahs run. They are only doing it kind of whenever they want to. There are scheduled times for the cheetahs to run. Unfortunately, if the cheetahs don't feel like running, or if it is hot out at the time, or any number of other reasons why the cheetahs may not decide to run and they just want to lie down in the shade instead, well, that's what you're going to see. So Cheetah Run, maybe not so great at the moment unless you happen to catch the cheetahs running. But Cheetah Hunt, a really fantastic, fantastic ride, and I encourage any coaster fan should head out. It's not going to be the most thrilling ride you've ever been on. In fact, it's really not that thrilling at all. The launches are fun, but they're not overly thrilling. It's not going to beat you up and shake you all around. It's really just a fun, entertaining adventure. If you do want to see more about Cheetah Hunt, I've got a whole lot more that I wrote about it, more photos, another interview about all of it, Cheetah Hunt and Cheetah Run, and plenty more over at InsideTheMagic.net, so you can see it all there. But it's open now at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. So with that said, now I want to completely shift gears to something I've been saying for a couple of weeks now that I was going to talk about here on the show, and that is Destination D, Walt Disney World. It is an event that was out here a couple of weeks ago over the weekend, and it was just a really fun weekend put on by D23, the Disney fan club. And it was just packed with presentations and so much information and entertainment that only a Disney fan would truly enjoy all the way through. And I want to take you through kind of a report here. The audio recording, unfortunately, was not available, or rather permitted, during Destination D, so I am not able to bring you the audio from any of the many presentations, which is unfortunate. However, I did take many notes along the way, and I want to run through those notes with you now, kind of recalling bits and pieces of each of the presentations that I attended throughout the weekend, which was most of them. I only missed a couple of them. It may get a little hectic here in my recollection of exactly what happened. I will be operating here from the best that I can remember, and the best that my notes make sense, and really to tell you what Destination D was all about. So Destination D was held just near the Magic Kingdom over at the Contemporary Resort. Check-in was real simple. You bought your ticket in advance, you showed up, you got your lanyard, and you moved on from there. Just outside the convention area, it was a merchandise availability, plenty of stuff to buy, of course. I didn't see personally too much that I wanted to buy, but a lot of the stuff sold out the first day, a lot of the limited items and all of that. But really, everybody there was to attend the big main room, the convention area, for all of the presentations that would be given. And the whole thing was kicking off Saturday morning with an opening remark by the head of D23, Stephen Clark. Now, he actually was going to come out and introduce it, but instead Don Turchetta, the armchair archivist for D23, kind of snuck into the presentation, if you will. Of course, it was planned, but that's the way it was perceived, and showed some funny pictures of Stephen Clark and that kind of thing. And then both of them ended up on stage to really introduce everybody to a fun weekend of everything that would be Destination D. The introduction was filled with comedy, a lot of jokes, and then after John Turchetta and Stephen Clark were finished, they introduced Debbie Dane Brown, who was the first ambassador of Josh Turchetta. Somebody in the chat room just corrected me. See, this is why having a chat room is good while we're doing this live recording here on YouTube. So I apologize for getting that name wrong. Moving on, once Josh Turchetta and Stephen Clark were finishing up their initial presentation there, just kind of introduction to the weekend, they welcomed Debbie Dane Brown, the first Walt Disney World ambassador, to the stage, and she had a few opening remarks as well to really kick off the whole thing. And it started, very fun from that moment on. The very first presentation following the introduction was called Weird Disney, and this is something that they did out at Destination D, the first one out at Disneyland last year. And it was from the new head of the archives, replacing Dave Smith, Becky Klein, as well as historian Paul F. Anderson. And the pair just basically went through and explored so much of what has been weird in Disney history. Far too much for me to go through all of it here. I am not going to recount every single thing that every presenter said, or else we would be here for 2 entire days. But just to name a few of the weird Disney items that were particularly interesting, it was a big focus as they went along during this presentation on old costumed characters. Certainly some of the original Mickey and Minnie Mouse costumes were a bit weird looking, and for those of you who are tuning in live right now on the YouTube stream, you're seeing some pictures that I took throughout Destination D as I'm talking about everything here. Fortunately, photos were allowed, where audio recording and video recording was not. Moving on, and of course everybody listening can also go back and watch this stream later, but moving on with the information here, certainly costumed characters were an abundance of weirdness over the years. There's a weird-looking white rabbit from the opening of the Alice in Wonderland ride years ago. They brought up a picture of some weird-looking crazy monkey thing making its way down Main Street. Certainly a lot of weirdness in Disney history that was absolutely hilarious and amusing as they went through. The crowd was in uproar of laughter every time one of these new slides came up, and it was just so funny to see all of the strangeness that has been in existence throughout Disney history. Another funny moment was when the pair mentioned that years ago out at Disneyland, this was a focus on Walt Disney World as much as possible, but they did start talking about Disneyland since there's more history there. Well, out at Disneyland, apparently you used to go fishing, and you could actually keep the fish that you would catch there. And as they said, that's really what you want to do when you're at a theme park, is walk around with a dead fish all day. Definitely some weirdness to be found there. When they finally moved over to Walt Disney World, they showed some really creepy kind of small world looking World Showcase representative costumed characters that just were just absolutely bizarre, and thankfully they're not walking around the World Showcase now. Speaking of the World Showcase and Epcot, they also brought up the fact that Barbie used to be at Epcot in a live stage performance. That's fortunately something that I personally never saw, but judging from the response from the audience of Disney fans who were there at Destination D, many seemed to remember Barbie very well, and the show that she put on. Barbie certainly is not in too many places around Walt Disney World currently. The grand finale of Weird Disney was absolutely hilarious. They played a 1970s commercial of sorts for Grad Night, which of course does not exist out here at Walt Disney World anymore. It has ended permanently as of this year. But this promo video was just absolutely hilarious. They had this strolling minstrels going through and almost recruiting these random college or high school kids and saying, hey, you need to come out to Disney. I'm not even going to try to sing the song that they were singing, but along the way it was just a I don't know, maybe a 10 or 15 minute film that was just filled with comedy. And at the time, of course, it wasn't really designed to be comedy, but showing it now in 2011 from a 1970s film, yeah, that's definitely comedy. The whole thing wrapped up the Weird Disney presentation with after plenty of laughters, with actually a giveaway in the audience. People checked under their seats and pulled out a little flower, and anybody who pulled that out got an assortment of random Disney stuff. So that was the conclusion of the Weird Disney panel. A great way to start off the weekend with Destination D. Very high energy, lots of comedy. In contrast, the second presentation to that was given by now retired archivist Dave Smith, a very valued member of the Disney community, a great guy, super nice guy, knows so much about Disney. But I will say, if you've ever seen Dave Smith speak, you know he can be a little bit dry. The information that he gives is fantastic. He, in this case, was talking about the construction of Walt Disney World, showed countless slides, just slide after slide after slide, up on the big projection screen of what Walt Disney World looked like, and the various parks looked like, and the resorts while they were under construction. Very interesting images of Main Street as it was under construction. Went up and down, looked at the Haunted Mansion when it was under construction. Of course, that is my favorite attraction, and it was fun to see dirt mounds and a half-built mansion with scaffolding and wood beams, and just really interesting to see. He took a look inside the mansion to the hitchhiking ghosts, which of course are now gone, and the mirror ghosts, and replaced by computer-generated versions. Well, the old ones were kind of wrapped in plastic. A really great image to show that I had never seen before. Hopped on over, kept looking at Magic Kingdom, moved over to the Contemporary. Showed the giant A-frame when it was under construction. Really, really interesting there as well. Showed a monorail when the monorails were first being built. Moved on to Epcot. Showed when all of the World Showcase and Future World was still very much under construction, and even moved on to Downtown Disney and the original Disney Village, Lake Buena Vista Shopping Village, and all of that. So a visually interesting presentation. If you watched the screen, listening to it though, Dave Smith is very monotone and certainly not animated like the previous group was. Fortunately, I did take pictures of every single slide that Dave Smith showed, so if you want to head over to insidethemagic.net/photos, then you can flip through all of the galleries from Destination D, from the presentations I've talked about so far from Weird Disney, as well as Dave Smith's, as well as all of the ones that I am about to talk about. And it's very interesting just to see every bit of all of this construction, and a great way to start out the whole thing. And please don't get me wrong, Dave Smith is a fantastic guy. His presentation was wonderfully informative. Like I said, he's just a bit monotone. That is all. But then again, I guess I can be a bit monotone too. So from there, the next presentation actually is one that I ended up skipping. It was going to be about Epcot history, and I really wanted to go to it. I love Epcot. Certainly wanted to learn more about everything that Epcot had. However, I learned at that point that Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, had soft opened, or was about to soft open. I wanted to head over there and be there for the very first preview of Star Tours. So I skipped out on a presentation in favor of that. And as it turned out, from what I understand, this Epcot presentation that I skipped was probably the least interesting of the weekend. I heard from people who were there that it was very dull, and that some people were nodding off. Of course, this is just hearsay. I can't say for sure whether or not it was the most uninteresting, but I heard that from many people, so take that for what it is. When I did return back to Destination D, I was catching the tail end of Walt Disney World on TV presentation, which featured Tim O'Day, who has appeared in many Disney presentations over the years, was one of the hosts of Destination D this year. In this last portion of the presentation there, I saw a couple of segments from the old Walt Disney World Inside Out, which Skipper Ben, who has been absent from the show quite a while, he'll be back soon, but he has shared a bit of Walt Disney World Inside Out in the show before. Also some Epcot opening day presentation footage as well, and it's stuff that you can probably find on YouTube, or you've probably seen before. Nothing groundbreaking, but certainly entertaining. It's always fun to see these old shows. Now, following that is a presentation I absolutely, definitely did not want to miss, and that was featuring Tony Baxter. Famed Imagineer Tony Baxter, of course, has worked on a number of projects over the years, beginning with Big Thunder Mountain years and years ago, and I couldn't even name everything that Tony Baxter has been working on. Unfortunately, there were no photos allowed during Tony Baxter's presentation of the Walt Disney World that never was, so I do not have any photos to share for that. You won't find them on the website, but I can tell you all about what Tony shared during his presentation. And as I said, it was the Walt Disney World that never was. And as you can imagine, it was basically running through plenty of artwork and imagery of attractions and areas that were never built as part of Walt Disney World. There was nothing, again, groundbreaking here. If you're a big Disney fan and you've read up on this sort of thing before, you probably didn't get anything new out of this presentation, but to hear it straight from Tony Baxter and see the artwork that was presented was really a treat. It's always wonderful to see him present anything, especially out here in Florida, where he does not visit all that often. So they started out by talking about the various resorts that did not happen, that were planned for around the Seven Seas Lagoon. There was going to be a Cape Cod resort next to a South Seas resort over on the Bay Lake side. On the other side, there was going to be a Yesterday Hotel, a Frontier Village, a Spanish Colonial Hotel, an Oriental Motel, Dutch and African motels. Many, many ideas there that never came to fruition. Of course, today we have the Grand Floridian, the Contemporary, and the Polynesian, but there were going to be so many more. And actually, at the time, Tony mentioned in the presentation, this was around 1967 or so, they were really ramping up, getting up to, building up to Walt Disney World. And apparently they had produced some old contemporary maps featuring some things that ultimately didn't get built. And because they had so many of these maps around, they ended up handing them out as just said, here, use them as like Christmas wrapping paper around Walt Disney Imagineering. Apparently today, if you find one of these bits of this old map, it's very, very valuable, and Tony Baxter joked that he wished he hadn't used it as wrapping paper. In addition to what I just mentioned, there's also the Venetian Hotel, which was talked about a lot. They went through some variations of the Haunted Mansion, where they talked about it originally looked a bit more colonial, actually quite a lot like the American Adventure building over at Epcot, but with a lot of brick. And always very interesting to see some different versions of the mansion than ultimately the Liberty Square version that they decided on. Similarly, they started talking about Frontierland, mentioning Mark Davis's artwork for some sort of bear band attraction that ultimately, I guess, evolved into the Country Bear Jamboree, though at the time was not going to be specifically that. It was mentioned that Mark Davis really liked to elaborate in his artwork with all kinds of ideas that he had, and lots of gags, and included a lot of waterfalls and audio animatronics. And as Tony put it, he didn't work in maintenance. Those are certainly notoriously difficult to deal with. But everybody loves waterfalls and animatronics, and we like it whenever they get in there. Some more items that never made it to Walt Disney World that Tony Baxter mentioned was a series of sketches for a Sleeping Beauty dark ride. Now, this is when they were talking about Walt Disney World's Fantasyland, and they thought, well, do we want to just bring over the same rides from Disneyland, the same dark rides, or do we want to develop some new ones? They kind of got the feeling eventually that people wanted to see the same dark rides, and so there were quite a few concepts that were scrapped, and this Sleeping Beauty dark ride was one of them. They went through a series of these sketches, very, very rough sketches about what a Sleeping Beauty ride would have been like. You're riding in this vehicle, and you would kind of approach Maleficent's goblin whatever, creatures, her henchmen, and then you would go inside sort of a castle and see the giant Maleficent dragon breathing fire and spewing fire at you, and really that's all there was to see at the time for the sketches, but it sounds like it could have been a really interesting attraction. Another one that never made it was sort of in the same vein as Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, except it was going to be the Wizard's Duel from Sword in the Stone. That one never happened either. There was an Alice in Wonderland ride concept that was developed for Walt Disney World's Fantasyland, in which it would be very different than the Alice ride out in California. This one would have combined the teacups with the dark ride. You would be spinning around in your teacup, not fast, but enough to make you look in different directions as you make your way through Wonderland, through the hedge maze, and all of that sort of thing. Ultimately, of course, now we have the teacups and no Alice in Wonderland ride, so that's just the way it goes. One of those things that we're not and probably will never get out here. Moving further in through this presentation, they considered at one point a Carousel of Progress update, and Mark Davis had suggested that rather than focusing on kind of the short-term history that will eventually go out of date, as you might notice if you visit the Carousel of Progress right now, the tomorrow scene is not exactly tomorrow anymore. They thought, well, what if we rework the Carousel of Progress to start with the dawn of time and then move through invention, kind of working your way through time? You would still follow Mother and Father as characters, but see them as they progress through time. So an interesting concept for Carousel of Progress that, again, never came true. Of course, it sounds very similar to working your way through Spaceship Earth or something like that. So similar concepts have evolved in the end. Moving on to Epcot, they discussed how in the World Showcase area, there were definitely many variations of the World Showcase considered over time. At one point, America, the country, was going to be in the front of the World Showcase as kind of the host country, and then they were going to feature a big Greek amphitheater in the back, and certainly we never got that, but we do have the American Gardens Theater where that was going to be, so they kind of just moved the American theater to the back side. Over for the Living Seas, there was a concept at one point for having a Poseidon-hosted show. There would be theater shows and a ride and a big aquarium. And Tony Baxter was really hooked on this idea of a crystal pavilion that features kind of different climates and ecology. And maybe it was going to be for the Living Seas. Maybe it was going to be for the land or Wonders of Life, or some sort of pavilion over at Epcot that would really focus on all of that. And eventually, as Baxter said, it became sort of a precursor to the biosphere, which was really built and people really lived in. So kind of interesting there. They also talked about a character called the Land Keeper, who was going to be host of a future fair of sorts. And this Land Keeper looked a whole lot like the Dream Finder. So another one of those concepts that kind of just evolves over time and makes its way through progress and ultimately became, Journey into Imagination. The Life and Health Pavilion that they had considered at the time was a dark ride of sorts, similar to Adventures Through Inner Space, but kind of Adventure Through a Body. But they ultimately decided that all the concepts they were coming up with were just too gooey, as Tony Baxter put it, that everything just looked gooey traveling through a body. So ultimately it became Body Wars, the simulator, and everything became far less gooey at the time. Moving on through a few more notes here. It was a very long presentation, very, very interesting presentation, as you can hear. I'm sure I didn't even write down everything that was said throughout this, and all of this was accompanied by some great artwork and drawings and that sort of thing up on the screen. There was a concept at one point for Epcot for the World Showcase that was to add a Tivoli Gardens to an island in the middle of the lagoon. They decided that they needed more kid-friendly entertainment at Epcot, and that was their idea. However, at some point during this concept, they decided, well, you know what? Forget that. Let's make it an adult island that people can have fun and really go all out and party at night in the middle of the lagoon. Well, ultimately, that morphed into Pleasure Island, so another one of those thought processes there. In addition, for the World Showcase, just a few other things they mentioned that were planned but never happened. There was going to be a Denmark area with ice skating, Japan with a Mount Fuji ride. Of course, Japan is there, but no Mount Fuji ride. There was also a light-up city with Omnimover planned. There is a show building over in Japan, just in case they ever decide to put some sort of ride there, but certainly nothing there now. There was a crazy sort of ride planned for Germany that was very heavily sponsored and influenced by Germany. Every country, of course, was involved in the creation of their own pavilion for the World Showcase. And for this Germany ride, it was going to end with this sort of menacing, flaming steel pit. And it was just far too much for Disney to continue with, so there is no Germany ride. But they did mention that's sort of how it worked in developing the World Showcase. It very much was involved with working hand in hand with the country, and whatever the country wanted, Disney kind of had to comply with. And an example that Tony Baxter gave was, if you look at the end of Maelstrom, you're going through this whole adventure, you got polar bears and trolls and waterfalls and all this great stuff, and then all of a sudden you're dumped into oil derricks. You're like, what is that all about? And apparently that was at the request of Norway, that they needed to emphasize the oil derricks at the end of the attraction, that's part of Norway. So interesting there. So the whole thing finally concluded with a really special presentation where they brought up something that many Disney fans know all about, the Western River Adventure. This is a concept that Mark Davis really put together for Walt Disney World, for the Magic Kingdom, instead of Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, eventually they came to decide that Pirates of the Caribbean needed to be in Florida, but originally they were thinking, what if Pirates is for California, and we have a Pirates-like ride for Florida, but instead it would be this Western River Adventure, where you would go through all these great Western scenes with similar, very, very similar gags to what you see in Pirates, with all these really zany characters and fun antics, but you get that whole feeling of being in what would be Thunder Mesa in this case, with these great, brilliant colors. Mary Blair stepped in to create all these purples and reds and yellows, and just a wonderful, wonderful attraction that never happened. But here in this presentation, they put together for Destination D all of the artwork that they could, along with some sound effects, and really just made this wonderful slideshow of what the Western River Adventure would have been. It's probably the best representation of riding through this without actually fully animating it or fully building it. It seems like it would have been such a fantastic attraction, this massive addition, or rather part of Frontierland at Walt Disney World. Instead, we have Pirates of the Caribbean, which is great, but it would have been nice to have a unique attraction instead. And ultimately, Big Thunder Mountain was kind of yanked out of this Thunder Mesa concept, and Big Thunder's a great ride, but certainly a Western River adventure, maybe someday, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But so there it is. That is a great presentation. Certainly one of the better ones throughout the weekend at Destination D. But the day was not over yet. There was still one more presentation, and that was something called Walt Disney World Resort on Film. Very similar to what had happened just a little bit ago. Prior to this presentation, it was Walt Disney World on TV. And in this case, they showed a series of film clips that related to Walt Disney World. And honestly, it was entertaining, and it was kind of a good, relaxing way to end the day. And it was Tim O'Day and Tony Baxter kind of chit-chatting about each one before showing these rather lengthy clips, maybe 20, 25 minutes each. But ultimately, they were just kind of film clips. And for me, going to Destination D, I particularly enjoyed seeing the actual in-person, kind of live presentations rather than just watching video clips up on the screen. So anyway, that was the end of day one for Destination D. Moving on to day two, I'd love to talk a bit about the very first opening of day two. Unfortunately, on my way over to Destination D on day two, the Iron Man competition was running its way through Walt Disney World streets and nearby streets as well. And as a result of that, my usual 15-minute drive between my house and the Contemporary took me right about an hour because I had to go way out of the way in order to get there. So I missed the first presentation of day two of Destination D. Fortunately, I didn't miss a whole lot. It was supposed to be a surprise that was going on, and the surprise was basically an announcement of how the D23 trivia contest will work when the D23 Expo comes up, and all of that has been, released since then, so not a big deal that I missed that. Fortunately, I was there in time for the first presentation of the day, which was absolutely a hilarious adventure put on by Walt Disney Imagineers. It was called Disney Tales. And it was the panelists that were there. There were three Imagineers, Jason Sorrell, Alex Wright, and Jason Grant. Absolutely hilarious. Had people rolling in the floors, practically. Rolling on the floors. Because Jason Sorrell is always a comedian whenever he gets on stage. Sure, he's a designer, entertainment director, writer, whatever you want to call him. But he's really a comedian at heart, and he always is going to crack jokes every time he is on stage, and this was no exception. And basically this presentation was kind of taking you through Imagineering 101, as they put it, and starting out with how Imagineering really works with the concept of it all starts with a story, of course. But then they elaborated on that. Well, what's a story? Well, you're going to have big things, and then you're going to have small things. And, they moved on to some examples of what exactly that means to have big things and small things. Or more specifically, they talked about the concept of having a long shot, a medium shot, and a close-up in developing a story idea. So they gave the example of Pirates of the Caribbean. If you think about it, you've got kind of the long shot, as they said, that you have this fort. As you're approaching Pirates of the Caribbean in Adventureland here in Florida, you've got a fort. Well, then you get to sort of a medium shot, and the example that they gave was having a drunk pirate sitting on a bridge. So then you're a little bit closer to the action. You see something having on, but then you get to the close-up, and that's the gag, and that's when you really get the fun, and that, of course, is the hairy leg that everybody knows from Pirates of the Caribbean. So, sort of an interesting way to tell a story the Imagineering way, to really have all those details. Think about it almost in cinematic terms, and go take the viewers and the audience and the guests through every step of the way, from the opening shot, seeing the outside, the establishing shot, and moving you all the way through the story, providing entertainment along the way. One quote that I pulled out of the whole thing that I thought was really interesting is that when they're designing environments like Pirates or really any environment around Walt Disney theme parks, they said, and I can't remember which of the three said it, they said that it should be believable but not real, that there is a distinction there, that Disney parks are believable environments in that when you're there, you feel like you can believe, you can enter into this world, and you're never removed from the fantasy that's been created. But it's not the real world. I mean, who wants to go to a theme park and be put into a real world? I mean, that's why you go to a theme park, especially a Disney park, is to escape from that reality. So that's a very key distinction in there, that sometimes it's, just that subtle difference in how you look at something that can really make it work the way that it should, and have a whole lot of fun. Throughout the rest of the presentation, these Imagineers talked in categories, basically, through some details around Walt Disney World that they thought perhaps people would not have necessarily noticed while walking around the resort. Just little things that they thought were kind of examples of Imagineering at its finest. And I'll give you a few of their examples as well. Once again, I did take pictures of all of their slides. You won't get the narration along with it, but if you go over to the website, to the photo gallery, you can kind of flip through and get the gist of what they were presenting. But in this case, here are a few examples. They called one of them the most instructional example around Walt Disney World, and that's over at Crush and Gusher, actually, at Typhoon Lagoon, where they mentioned that the safety sign when boarding Crusher Gusher is like absurdly detailed in the way that it's written, and part of the theme and part of the story. That if when you're at Crush and Gusher next time, take a look at that safety sign, and you'll be surprised at just how much how involved the writing is on just one very simple thing that basically just wants you to be safe. In addition, they noted real quick, Jason Sorrell noted that he is actually the voice of the safety announcement at Crush and Gusher, which is something that it seemed like the whole audience did not realize. I certainly didn't know that, and he did a little bit of the voice there on stage, which of course was one of many, many moments in which everybody laughed and applauded and enjoyed Sorrell's interesting brand of entertainment. Moving on, there was what they were calling the most obscure bit of Disney artwork. Jason Grant was the one who mentioned that in designing kind of this big piece of artwork for Innoventions over at Epcot, he had to put all these sort of colorful shapes in there. And he was thinking in his head, what kind of shapes did he want to put in there? Maybe some gears, some other sort of Innoventions type things. But then there's this one little odd shape in there that he ultimately revealed here in the presentation, that this particular shape is the side shape of the stairs in the middle of the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, the stairs that kind of lead up to nowhere. Like when you're going around the circular part of the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, you see these stairs and you wonder, where did those stairs go? Well, Jason Grant apparently has been wondering that for years. It's been embedded in his head, and eventually he worked the shape of the side of those stairs into artwork at Epcot, just because it's been buried in his subconscious. So another one of those just interesting little details at Imagineering that you probably never would catch unless they were to share it at something like Destination D. Another example of what they mentioned there is they said most in-scale item around Walt Disney World would be the train set at in Germany, near Germany at Epcot, and that everything is in perfect scale. And they said that there's even cast members who have to go out there and cut the grass with scissors because they need to keep the grass at the right height to be in scale with the rest of the train set there, which is that's got to be an interesting job to get down on the ground and cut grass with scissors. The most out of scale, they gave the example of the American Adventure building over at Epcot as well, because apparently that building is more stories. I can't remember if they said 4 or 5 stories, versus all of the other World Showcase buildings are 3 stories. So they didn't want it to be clashing with everything else. And of course, they said that in colonial periods, when this building is supposed to represent, they didn't have massive buildings like that. So they wanted it to be a 3-story building. So they oversized the doors, oversized the windows, and it is a massive building that does not look as massive as it needs to be, and as it is, in order to hide the American Adventure attraction that is there in the background. Another really interesting detail that, of course, I am a Haunted Mansion fan, and so they showed the most spirited detail, and that is the Book of the Dead that is in the Leota seance scene currently in the Haunted Mansion, and this book is just incredibly detailed, and Disney has released a bit of that artwork before. It's been on a pin, and but they wanted to show a close-up of this inscription, sort of this incantation at the top of this Book of the Dead, and apparently that incantation is taken directly from Blackbeard's ghost. I guess it was the incantation that would summon Blackbeard's ghost, the old Disney film. And I think it was Jason Sorrell who was working on this, and he said he even went so far as to call up the Disney archives and make sure he got the spelling correct on this bizarre incantation for Blackbeard's ghost. So, one of those details that no guest ever will see, but it is a great reference to an old Disney film, just one of those additional details that makes a Disney park that much more fun. Here's another fun one that I never really realized, but as soon as they pointed it out, it was brutally obvious. In the Bibbidi Bobbidi boutique, there are a lot of blues and pinks, and then they said, well, they put those colors in there because it was inspired by the fairy godmother and her outfit, and that makes perfect sense. Of course, the Bibbidi Bobbidi boutique would be inspired by the fairy godmother, but it's just one of those things. Maybe you don't make the connection specifically in your head, but now that you hear it and now that you know it, and maybe subconsciously you always knew it, it just fits in absolutely perfectly. So they went on and on and on and on in a good way about more and more examples like this, and finally they concluded with what they decided was the most detail per square foot, with a very recent example, which is the Backstage with Mickey Mouse in the Town Square Theater over at the Magic Kingdom, where they have just crammed so many details throughout this whole area, and they went through a few of the details that they thought perhaps people were overlooking as they went through there. They're just far too many to mention. So that was a very interesting, very exciting, and very hilarious presentation at Destination D. Certainly a great way to start off day number 2. Now, directly following that was a second Imagineering presentation. This time was almost a press conference. It was something I've already talked about here on the show, so I'm not going to go into too many details this week about it. But essentially in this one, there was another panel of Imagineers, and this time it was about new and what's coming to Walt Disney World, and it was very newsy sort of things. And like I said, I did talk about this a couple of weeks ago, but the subjects that they covered were Star Tours, of course. Star Tours is the big item right now, and at the time it was not officially open yet, so they shared some concept art for Star Tours. They went through and talked about the Art of Animation Resort, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago when they said all of this, and they went through basically all the details for the Art of Animation Resort. Very, very exciting. If any of you missed it out there, you can definitely go back and listen to, I think it was show 319, to see all of that, or you can go over to InsideTheMagic.net, where I've summarized all of that as well. And then they concluded by talking about the new Fantasyland and some changes and all of that's going to be put in there. A very, very interesting panel. It was very rapid fire, very fast pace, a lot of information and artwork to take in a small amount of time. Fortunately, it was right before lunch, so you can kind of digest, if you will, all of that information before continuing. Then, of course, I spent my lunch period posting all of that because there was so much to come out of that presentation. Very, very newsworthy presentation. And after lunch were 2 back-to-back panels filled with Disney legends, and these were very, very interesting, very different pace from the earlier presentations in the day. This, of course, was all a look back at how Walt Disney World was created. In fact, the first of the 2 was called Creating a Whole New Disney World. Now, the panel here, and I apologize if I missed any names or I'm mispronouncing any names. It was I don't know if I caught every single person. It was a panel of 6 people, and it was all hosted by Marty Sklar, who I don't even think I need to give an introduction here. I think everybody knows Marty, of course, has been around with the Walt Disney Company for so many years. Recently did retire from his position at Walt Disney Imagineering, but certainly has had many key roles in the Disney Company throughout the years. So he was hosting this panel, and the panel included Bob Price Foster, who worked to acquire land in Florida when they were first working on the idea of Walt Disney World. Also, there was Bob Gurr, who was basically the way you describe what Bob Gurr did at Disney was if it moved, he was involved. We're talking about doom buggies and monorails and all of that sort of thing. Bob Gurr is one of the designers, or the designer behind all of that. Ron Logan was there, who worked on bands and costume and stage shows, and currently teaches at Rosen College here in Orlando. Debbie Dane Brown was there once again. She was the first Walt Disney World ambassador. Orlando Ferrante was there. He worked on World's Fair at Walt Disney Imagineering, worked on Paris and Tokyo. And so there it is. That was the panel of Imagineers, or rather of Disney legends, and just so many interesting topics and stories that were shared throughout this. You can imagine what it's like to put a group like this together in one room and just have them essentially chit-chat about what it was like to create Walt Disney World. Certainly so much to share, and I tried to take as best notes as I could along the way. I will share bits and pieces here, but it was a very, I don't want to say rambling, but a very... a conversation that sort of ebbed and flowed through and didn't necessarily all make sense together. So what I'm about to say may not entirely make sense together either. But along the way, these legends talked about how when they first came here to Walt Disney World, it took about 20 minutes to fly around the property. It was a huge piece of property. It was all jungle, as they put it, and they wondered, what has Walt gotten us into? There was no one in Florida at the time to support the staff that was coming here. They had to bring everything with them. I mean, it was just nothing. You look at Walt Disney World now and you see this amazing creation with all these roads and buildings and all of the infrastructure that is here, but none of the cityness was in this area. There was nothing to support a construction project of this size. So all of it had to come with them. They said that the monorails came all the way from Washington at 55 tons each, and just a major, every step of the way was just a completely astounding accomplishment. Of course, at the time, they didn't want everybody to know that Disney was buying up property. It was Project X. Walt Disney himself had only been to Florida once before the purchase was going on, and he actually was spotted at one point in public in Florida before they had made the announcement that they were indeed going to build a Walt Disney World, and he denied being himself. He said, no, I'm not Walt Disney. So a kind of interesting story there. They tried to buy up all of these parcels of land from various landowners throughout the area, trying to get this one cohesive, conjoined piece of land that ultimately would become Disney World. And there were a number of parcels that they were able to secure, very large amounts. But there was this one particular area over at, if you know the area, 535 and I-4, kind of just outside downtown Disney. Well, apparently this particular area that they wanted to buy this land, these parcels were sold by mail order originally, and it was really tough to track down the owners because some of the people didn't even know that they were owners of this land. It had been passed on through a family and that sort of thing. And so they said there was something like 80 to 95 of these parcels that were just 5 acres each. And because of these particular bits of land, it ended up extending the buying process by a year in order to try to get all of that into Disney's possession before they made the announcement that Walt Disney World would be indeed built in Central Florida. Also, there's a bit of property over by Epcot that is currently, and I can't remember the name of the hotel right now off the top of my head, but it's not Disney-owned property. But apparently the reason Disney was never able to get control of that particular piece of property, as it was revealed here at Destination D, is that it was held in trust by, I guess, the family of Shanghai Czech. And I'm sure I just pronounced that wrong, but I guess they tried to reach out to him, to that group, that trust, that whoever it was, and they just never got a reply that it was ever for sale, and just never were able to get a hold of that particular bit of property. Ultimately, once they did make the announcement that Walt Disney World would be coming here, they built a preview center, and apparently 1.3 million people eventually went to the preview center. 80% of them was by car, traveling around Florida to check out what exactly would be there. And this is really where Debbie Dane Brown was able to step in, because she worked at the preview center prior to Walt Disney World. She was one of the very first employees there, and she said the kind of questions that she got was, will there be a Ferris wheel? Will there be hotels? Will Mickey Mouse be there? And the biggest question that she got was, can I get a job? Or how do I get a job? And, it just kind of went on like that until finally it opened. And concluding this round one of a Legends panel, Marty Sklar went around and asked the whole group, what would Walt Disney think about Walt Disney World? And I'll run through these answers. They were very brief. Bob Foster said, Walt would be proud. He would think it was impressive and really like the fair treatment of people. Orlando Ferrante said, Walt would probably say, you didn't do too bad without me. Bob Gurr said Walt Disney would think it's an amazing place and true to his ideals. Debbie Dane Brown said that Walt would probably be happy with how the cast members are creating his dream. And then Ron Logan said that he met Walt a few times and thought he had a strong that he would think there's a strong theme and leadership to Walt Disney World. So that was Legends panel number 1, which was immediately followed by a very similar concept for a panel, but a completely different panel. This one was called Making the Magic Happen, and it was kind of picking up where that one left off with a whole new panel. And this one, I'm completely confident that I didn't catch everybody's name, unfortunately, because they went through them very fast at the beginning. But Charlie Ridgway was there, who was a publicist for Walt Disney World years ago. Jack Lindquist was there, was the first Disneyland president, and this one was hosted by Tim O'Day. Unfortunately, I did not catch all of the other names. I'm sure they're online somewhere. But regardless, just to kind of summarize here what was said in this second Legends panel at Destination D, they were talking about opening day at Walt Disney World. Of course, opening day was a monumental occasion. Of course, they planned it at the time of the year, October, when they thought the least amount of people would be there so that they could have a nice, soft opening and not have to deal with, all the craziness that perhaps Disneyland had years ago and all of the issues there. But they thought a pretty good amount of guests would show up. Well, apparently it was a very foggy day on this opening day of Walt Disney World, and they couldn't necessarily see how many people had gathered outside the Magic Kingdom turnstiles to get into the very first Walt Disney World theme park. Well, eventually the fog lifted and they saw that it wasn't nearly the amount of people that they thought were going to be there. There were somewhere around 5,000 cast members ready to go on that first day, and something around 8,000 guests showed up. So a pretty good ratio there from guests to cast members. Some local media had anticipated anywhere up to 200,000 people showing up at that beginning. So definitely a big difference from what some had anticipated then. But all went fairly well. They also had previously soft opened the Magic Kingdom to construction worker families, and they said that perhaps also lessened the opening day crowd because a lot of people who had shown up there at the beginning for with construction workers and their families and etc. had already been there, so they didn't need to be there on opening day as well. However, their very first big test on what Walt Disney World, how it would handle the crowd, would be the day after Thanksgiving, in which they received a massive crowd, their first massive crowd to Walt Disney World. It ran all the way down I-4 and along 192. People were camping on the side of the road, and moving people around ended up being a really big problem. They didn't have as many monorails then. The trams weren't working necessarily, and all did not necessarily go as planned. And that's kind of a brief overview of how of everything that was talked about. I did not take a whole lot more notes, unfortunately, during this particular presentation. It was very interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot, but it was essentially the final presentation of Destination D, and I think I was running out of note-taking ability at that point. They did conclude with, again, what would Walt think, and I caught two of the responses here. Jack Lindquist, first Disneyland president, said he thought Walt Disney would be proud, but no one can say for sure. No one can say what Walt would have done. And I think that really summarizes it very, very well. So following those two Disney Legends presentations, there was a great photo op on stage where those who were in the audience, all the Disney fans, could get up and take pictures of, they brought out both panels and really could see everybody who was there and get some great shots of all of the legends who were in attendance. And then there was a meet and greet afterwards as well, to where Destination D attendees could get an autograph and a picture and chat for just a brief moment with some of these legends, as well as Tony Baxter. and a few of the other people who were there for Destination D. So that brings us to one final presentation for Destination D Walt Disney World, and that was called Magic Journeys. This was after a dinner break. It was at night, and this was going to be the big finale nighttime concert. Now, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, some of the surprises that were there, but I don't know if I mentioned everything. It started out with an introduction from Denny Zavit, who was a musical artist who had played years ago for Disney in the parks, and he really entertained the crowd. Following him was some sort of 80s style dancers, if you will, very retro Walt Disney World dance number. Following them was the Main Street Philharmonic that came marching into the crowd and played some excellent familiar Disney tunes. A very, very talented group. Then the main feature was none other than Richard Sherman of the Sherman Brothers fame, who went through pretty much his entire catalog of songs, both starting outside of Disney and working his way through every imaginable Disney tune that the Sherman Brothers have come up with over the years, from It's a Small World to Mary Poppins to Carousel of Progress and well beyond that. And then, of course, the big surprise that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago was the appearance of the Dreamfinder with Figment. The first time the Dreamfinder has shown up at Walt Disney World in many, many, many years. Huge applause there. A big sing-along happened. He went over to Richard Sherman, had him play One Little Spark on the piano while everybody sang along. It was just a wonderful, amazing a moment that everybody certainly enjoyed, but that actually wasn't even the finale of the whole musical performance. After the Dreamfinder was done, Richard Sherman left the stage, and we moved into kind of the finale, at which point Billy Flanagan, who has been performing at Disney parks for a number of years, along with a few other musicians, came out. They sang the main theme song to the American Adventure show over at Epcot, a very inspiring performance and song. Following that, the cast member ensemble called Encore, which is a small orchestra along with a choir, came out and sang a whole bunch of kind of a medley of old classic retro Epcot attraction songs. And in the end, it all wrapped up, and everybody thought this final Magic Journeys performance was easily worth the price of admission for Destination D. So that is the weekend, Destination D, Walt Disney World. It was quite the weekend. It had many more ups than downs, a few duller moments throughout the presentations, but for the most part, it was hilarious, it was informative, it was entertaining, and it was just a joy to be there. And I think Disney did a fantastic job in conjunction with D23, their fan group, in putting together this whole event over the course of the 2 days. And I hope they continue to do that again out here in Florida. It was really great to have an event of this caliber come to Orlando rather than just being at Disneyland, where where everybody normally is. Everybody lives out in California, the Imagineers, etc. But to have everybody come out here and treat Orlando and Walt Disney World to this type of event was just really, really fantastic. So hopefully my notes and my pictures for those of you watching on YouTube, or if you're watching later, would take you through what Destination D was all about. I really wish I could have shared some audio recordings or some video from that, but all of that was not allowed, unfortunately. So my description will just have to do, and hopefully it did. So there it is, Destination D, Walt Disney World. And that about wraps up show 321 of Inside the Magic. A very long show here, but we had a lot to talk about. I've been meaning to get to all of my report from Destination D and the summary of everything that happened there for a couple of weeks now. And I'm glad that we have caught up there. Definitely head on over to InsideTheMagic.net, particularly /photos, to see all of the galleries from Destination D. A lot of great images that were shown up on the projections and slides and artwork and all of that kind of thing that you can have fun checking out in lieu of video, which, as I said, was not allowed. And I'll try to put together kind of a highlights wrap-up article as well once I have a moment to do that. Probably won't happen this week because there's so much excitement coming up. But this Thursday and Friday are the big openings out at Disneyland. We've got the Little Mermaid, Ariel's Undersea Adventure. We've got Star Tours. We've got the official opening. Technically, it's already officially opening, but the sort of opening again of Mickey's Soundsational Parade, as well as all of everything from the Disneyland Hotel and so much more. And I can't wait to see all of that and bring you back a report from all of that as well. And it's just been a busy, fun, crazy time as we lead into the summer months here, and I hope you're enjoying following along with all of it. I do want to thank Magical Travel for sponsoring this week's episode of Inside the Magic. You can find out more about their services by visiting magicaltravel.com, and please do visit us over at lanyardlab.com to see all of the different styles and custom lanyard options that we have available. You can request a price quote today to receive a free digital preview of your lanyard design. And of course, between episodes of this podcast, please do head to InsideTheMagic.net. There you'll find so much more than the podcast, also videos and photos and news and articles. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and all those links are over there as well. We're always posting online whenever anything happens in the world of Disney and theme parks. Plenty of fun to be had. So check it all out over at InsideTheMagic.net. So thanks to all of you for listening each and every week, and have a magical week. Bye.
Beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away.